Today, we're going on a journey. We're heading back in time, but not to look at battles or ancient kings. No, we're going to explore centers of learning that were so advanced, so sophisticated, they'd feel right at home in the modern world. Just think about that for a second. A huge, bustling academic city, jam-packed with scholars from all over the known world, debating everything from philosophy to science. All of this happening long before places like Oxford or Harvard were even a dream. Sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, right? Well, it wasn't fantasy. This was real. This was Nalanda, a mega university in ancient India. And that number, over 10,000 students, believe me, that's just the tip of the iceberg. All right, so let's dive into the most famous of these institutions first, Nalanda. And you have to understand, this wasn't just a school. It was a true academic metropolis, a shining beacon of knowledge for the entire ancient world.
I mean, just look at these stats. We're talking about a completely residential campus. Students and teachers lived there, they ate there, they breathed academia 24/7. And with over 1,500 teachers, the access to mentors was incredible. But you couldn't just show up and enroll. Nope. You had to pass some seriously tough oral exams with scholars at the gate. Admission was purely based on merit.
And the heart of this city, its absolute soul, was the library. They called it Dharmaganja, the mountain of truth. And it really was a mountain. It wasn't one building, it was 3 massive ones. One of them, legend says, was 9 stories tall. 9 stories! It held hundreds of thousands of handwritten manuscripts. It was, without a doubt, one of the greatest collections of knowledge anywhere on Earth at the time.
And check out what they were studying. Now, you might think it was all about religion, and yeah, Buddhist philosophy was at its core, but Nalanda was so much more than that. It was deeply multidisciplinary. You could study logic, medicine, advanced mathematics, even astronomy. It was a place where science and spirituality weren't just neighbors, they were partners.
So here's the big takeaway for Nalanda. It wasn't some isolated monastery hidden away from the world. It was a vibrant international hub. It pulled in the best and brightest minds from China, from Persia, from all over Southeast Asia. They all came for one reason, to learn, and to add their own piece to this incredible engine of knowledge. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. Nalanda, as massive and important as it was, wasn't a one-off. It was actually the brightest star in this huge constellation of learning centers that were scattered all across ancient India. Each one had its own specialty, its own unique focus. And just look at the timeline. You can really get a sense of how long this tradition lasted. It all started with pioneers like Takshashila way back in the 6th century BCE. That's ancient history even for the ancient world. And this tradition of building these incredible institutions just kept going, evolving for well over 1,000 years. And there wasn't just one blueprint for how to do it. You had these 2 fascinatingly different models. On one hand, you have Takshashila, the early pioneer. It was decentralized, kind of like a collection of independent schools where individual masters taught their students. Then you have Nalanda, the massive, centralized, all-in-one campus model. 2 totally different philosophies, and both were wildly successful. Specialization was a really big deal. For example, Takshashila was the place to go for practical sciences. We're talking medicine, political strategy, stuff that shaped empires. Vikramashila, on the other hand, became the world's leading center for Tantric Buddhism and the intense art of philosophical debate. And then there was Valabhi, a major rival to Nalanda, which carved out its own niche in secular subjects. You wanted to be a lawyer, an economist, a city administrator, you went to Valabhi. So this system created these amazing specialized hubs everywhere. It was like every region had its own academic superpower. If you were passionate about astronomy and math, you'd head to Ujjain. It was actually a prime meridian for ancient time calculation. If you wanted to dive deep into Hindu philosophy, you'd travel south to the temple city of Kanchipuram. Each place had its own unique expertise. Okay, so we've seen the campuses and the subjects, but what did it actually feel like to be a student back then? What was the philosophy, the system that tied all of this together? This table really breaks it down. Across all these different universities, you see these common threads that honestly feel incredibly modern. You've got campus life, admissions based on your talent, not your family name, and a culture that actively welcomed international students. They had a deep, profound respect for libraries. But most importantly, look at that line about debate. This was absolutely central. Learning wasn't a passive thing. It was an active, fierce, intellectual contest of ideas. And the actual learning process was this really structured path to becoming a master.
It all started with oral recitation. You listened to your teacher and you absorbed the knowledge. Then came memorization, but this wasn't just parroting words, it was about internalizing the deep meaning of the texts. The real test, though, was the Shastrartha, a formal, high-stakes debate where you had to defend your knowledge against everyone, and finally, you had to prove you got it by applying it to real-world problems. So you have this incredible system, this golden age of knowledge that lasted for centuries. But what is its real legacy? And where did it all go? Why did this amazing era eventually come to an end?
Let's be clear about why this matters so much. For more than 1,000 years, these centers made ancient India a global superpower in education. They were pioneers in research and debate. And they did something truly unique. They seamlessly integrated scientific inquiry with a deep spiritual and ethical foundation. All of it was made possible by this powerful partnership between the community and royal patrons who funded it all.
So what happened? Well, sadly, it wasn't just one thing. It was a slow decline over centuries. A big part of it was foreign invasions that led to the actual physical destruction of places like Nalanda. This was made worse by political instability, which meant the money and protection from kings started to dry up. And then much later, the rise of a completely new colonial system of education just fundamentally changed the entire landscape.
And maybe this is the most important idea to take away from all of this. For these ancient thinkers, knowledge wasn't cut up into little separate boxes like it is today. Science and spirituality weren't enemies. They were two sides of the same coin. This was revolutionary. It wasn't about choosing reason or faith. It was about using both to get a complete, holistic understanding of the universe and your place in it.
And that really brings us to a final thought. When you see how these incredible institutions, these mountains of truth, could eventually crumble and disappear, it makes you ask a really important question. How fragile are our own modern centers of knowledge? And what do we need to do to make sure they don't meet the same fate?